Anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time running around shouting that he has been robbed. The fact is that most putts don't drop. Most beef is tough. Most children grow up just to be like people, and most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual tolerance, and most jobs are more full of dull than otherwise. Life is like an old time rail journey. Delays, sidetracks, smoke, dust, cinders, and jolts, interspersed only occasionally by beautiful vistas and thrilling bursts of speed. The trick is to thank the Lord for letting you have the ride. Duane, first timer on the AMA, sir. How you doing?
Doing good. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
That's perfect, dude. Well, as everyone knows, I think last week I mentioned Ryan's on a Africa hunt with M42 Adventures. You can learn more, m42adventures.com. And he's not back yet. So we get a run without Ryan another week. And Ryan pinged Duane and said, hey, Duane, you have a great background. And you got a good mic set up. So let's join the podcast. If you guys are curious what I'm talking about, you can join us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Order of Man if you want to connect with us there. So let's hop into this. Duane, you mentioned that you didn't have a headline. I have not really a headline this week, more of a, I don't know, just a thought that has been crossing my mind. And I read it somewhere and I can't remember where I read it. I'm so horrible, but I wrote down my version of it. And it goes like this. It says, if you cannot explain why you believe something, then perhaps you don't even believe it. But it's just something that you've chosen to outsource to a tribe that you belong to, or actually to someone else. And that resonated with me primarily just because in society, especially during a political season, how opinionated we all are around things. And we share our thoughts and our opinions. We get on soapboxes like it's truth. But in essence, it's just regurgitated information that you got somewhere else and you actually aren't in the know. And so a challenge for me as I think about this is, how many things am I just assuming that I read that is truth? And I'm not connected close enough to it. I actually don't know. And we can even start looking at areas, not just in social circles, but you can look from a leadership perspective. How often does a leader see something, they have an indicator, and they go, oh, the problem must be XYZ, without asking, without digging in, without getting to know, without critical thinking. And we just jump to judgments and assumptions all the time. And so, I don't know, maybe this is just a call out to be a little bit slow to judge, critically think, and realize that information, perception, man, there's so much more to things than probably what we give credit to.
Totally. I think that's really important in the season we are in today, is to make sure that you're stopping and thinking about it. I always assume positive intent from both sides. Right? Like whether you're on the left or the right, or you were in the wrong, or something, got reported at work, whatever that might be, assume the positive intent. I'm sure they were trying their best.
Yeah.
Is it enough? That's a different conversation. It isn't what we believe that they should be doing. But I think if you go into something and assuming a positive intent, then you have a good perspective on that. And then you can ask clarifying questions from there.
Well, and this is the power of taking ownership. Because that's what ownership kind of is. It's not assuming positive intent per se, but it's assuming that the judgment or the issue is not over there, but it's probably with you, which kind of implies that positive intent and negative intent on you.
Yeah.
Right. And it forces us. And I had a rant on the socials like last week around this, is if we're going to take on ownership around something, if you can't tell me exactly where you're taking responsibility for, you're not taking ownership. You're just raising the flag of, hey, I'm taking ownership over here, right? But if you can't say, hey, actually, it's this particular area, this is what I need to do, this is where I went wrong, you're not taking ownership yet. And so make sure you're critically thinking enough to identify the pivot that you would make. If you can't say what the pivot is, you're not taking ownership in the grand scheme of things.
It reminds me of those leaders that are always like, "Oh, I'm such a servant leader." And you're like, I don't think you shouldn't have to say it, right? Like, we know you're taking extreme ownership when you're like, "Hey, we're going to fix these things and this is what we're going to work on." But if you're like, "Oh, it's all my fault. I'm such a martyr."
Yeah.
Like, all right, guys, let's
Yeah.
move on and let's actually focus on something that's going to move the needle forward instead of like pointing fingers, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Which is sometimes that martyr approach is just another way of looking good, right? And taking credit for something. Yeah.
Yeah,
just in a negative way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're going to field questions from the Iron Council. That's our exclusive brotherhood. To learn more about the IC, go to orderman.com/Iron Council. Enrollment's going to open for the Iron Council. Is it next month already? I believe so.
Yeah, it is already. Yeah. Wow.
Next month. So keep in mind that enrollment will open in roughly about a month or so. To learn more, though, go to that website to find out more. I had one question, Duane, that you didn't see that's actually from last week that I wanted to cover from the Foundry before we get into the questions that we asked the men earlier today. Is by Joe Myers. He says, what advice would you give a young man seeking knowledge on how to be a man in a time when there are so many contradictory definitions of what being a man is, and there are several online influencers saying that they have the answer and the way towards being a man? I ask not as an attack on the market of men helping men be men, but as a dad that was placed in a position of his daughter's boyfriend. Well, he is her ex now, unfortunately. Didn't have any male influences in their life until he started trade work. So what's your thoughts, sir?
Yeah. Did you say that came from the Order of Man group?
Yeah, it came from the Foundry, one of the guys in the Iron Council.
Got it. Well, I would say that they're on the right path, is joining other men in the fight, in the battle, to kind of bounce that off each other. I find a lot of men that are in the Iron Council have a background where they need to see somebody else in like kind of a strong leadership authority position and have a good example of what being a man looks like, because they might not have had that growing up. And a lot of men were kind of wounded by their father figure, wherever that might be, and they're looking for just a better example of it. So I think that's a good start, is to get around other men and identify what they like about it, and then be able to assess that and say, like, is this what I consider to be a positive trait, or is this something that is, detracting from masculinity overall?
Totally. Yeah, it's not surprising, right? The answer is model it, right? Be the model for people to see and choose to be, right? So Joe, obviously you're a male figure in this boy's life. And so the best way to have him seek knowledge on being a man is you and how you're showing up as a man. And it's interesting. We talk about this sometimes in the Iron Council, where guys will talk about how they're going to make pivots, right, on a battle plan and try to show up more powerfully as a husband or whatever. And one thing that they'll do is they'll do it silently. Like, oh, I'm going to make all these adjustments, but I'm not going to tell my wife what I'm working on. I'm not going to let her know. Like, I'm just going to do it and hope that people notice. And I actually disagree. I think in most cases, and we got to be careful here, because the flip side of this, you go running your mouth about all the things you're going to do and then you never do them. Assuming that we have integrity and we're actually going to follow through on what we're doing, there's power in enlisting people, looking for opportunities to express what you're about, what's important to you, and not being silent about it, right? So Joe, not only do you need to model what a man looks like to this young man, but you need to take advantage of the opportunities to enlist him in it, to enroll him about what it's like to be a man. Look for those little opportunities of, oh, why this is so important, and look for those lessons of coaching whenever you can, not from a perspective of preaching, but mostly from a perspective of sharing, so he can consider it for himself. And I think those principles of influence and impact are transcendent beyond this conversation of just a young man trying to figure out what it is to be a man.
Well, and that's a great opportunity, like you mentioned, is bringing him along the journey. There might be opportunities to go out and have outings and, kind of share those experiences with him. Like if you are going to the jiu-jitsu gym offer, right? Like, hey, come with me, right? Like, see what it's like to live a life in the day of a man that's actually getting after it, right? And like
Yeah.
share some of those hardships, right?
Yeah. And then after you're done, tell him, why do you do it? What's the benefit you get out of it? Right. And so they can see the bigger picture. Yeah.
Exactly.
Good call.
Yep.
Good call. All right. Ryan Partain, how have your personal views of what it means to protect, provide, and preside changed since you started this journey with Order of Man? And I just want to call out, in case you guys haven't looked at the logo or anything, right? In the logo, Order of Man logo, you'll see the words protect, provide, and preside. It's obviously a foundation of Ryan's book, sovereignty and a number of things. And it's things that we use as somewhat of a framework within the Iron Council. So with that said, Duane, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, those are the three core tenets that we really focus on. And I would say that since being in the Order of Man in the Iron Council, I've been in for 5 years. I've just gotten a deeper understanding and appreciation for each of those words. Like initially, it's like, oh, I want to have accountability and be around a band of brothers that are working on the same things. You could do that in a lot of areas of life, right? You could be at work or any one of your hobbies, but this is more holistic. So it's been really interesting. On a regular basis, we'll go on a monthly basis and we'll have these topics and we'll just dig deeper into that meaning and we'll share amongst everybody else what it looks like for each one of us. And I figure that brings those different unique perspectives. Obviously, we're all men in this, but you have men from all over the world and they're really sharing some of their backgrounds and their insights. And I've really loved to go deeper into these and, really dissect what it means to preside, not boss, right? Like not be authoritative and like really demanding, but it's just being there and being that protector for your family is kind of like once you figure out all three of those, they really unlock a kind of a next level of masculinity that I love.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, at first glance, when I looked at protect and provide, I went with physically protect, provide a living. And to your point, you start getting of providing a spiritual refuge, providing emotional safety, right? And we start looking at these bigger, deeper elements that makes us actually bigger men. And I agree with you, Duane. Probably the biggest pivot, and I bring it up primarily just because so many guys get sideways with preside. In fact, I met with a men's group up in Ogden, Utah. Geez, it's probably been about 2 weeks ago, and this was the question, which was talk to us about preside. Because when we hear that, we immediately get on our heels of, oh my gosh, this is command and control. This is the patriarchy, in a negative way. It's negative leadership. It's all this horrible stuff that they perceive. And I think what they perceive or what some might hear when they hear that word is poor leadership. Well, leadership is not good or bad, but it can be done poorly. People in authority often will practice unrighteous dominion. That's part of what it means to be human. We have all these quotes around people with authority and power practicing it unrighteously. Preside is no different. And for me, that definition is around guidance and direction, but not control. And I would suggest it's guidance and direction in almost all areas. It doesn't mean we do all the work, but are we ensuring everything is buttoned up? And for me, if I outsource something and I just push it off and I'm not connected to it, it actually means I'm also not caring and showing it powerfully. But if it's something really important to me, I'm presiding over it. And that doesn't mean controlling, right, or anything else. It means I'm looking over to make sure that I'm involved, that I'm in the know, so I can help, so I can support. And that was probably one of the bigger definitions that I think some guys struggle with, at least when they hear those three words.
It kind of reminds me of what we were talking about earlier of having that extreme ownership and kind of the buck stops here with your family or with whatever you're doing is you kind of preside over it. But like you mentioned, you don't necessarily have to be the one doing the thing, but making sure that it got done for the family.
Yeah. And how many guys are like, not to put you on the spot, Duane, but a natural tendency that most people will struggle with is like the kids and the household And their schooling, I have no idea. Like, it's kind of like there's so many memes about how funny it is that you would, how dare you ever ask a dad what your kid's schedule is or any of that stuff. And it's like, it shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't. Not if we genuinely care, and we need to level up and make sure that we're showing up in a way that's powerful to serve and benefit our families. And I think far too often we've outsourced a great many deal of our responsibilities to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, look at the TV dad, right?
Yeah.
Like a typical TV dad is a goof and he's absent-minded and he's, doing all sorts of things. I think it's Modern Family, like the Phil Dunphy. And you're like, that's not like the best way to show up for your family, right? Like
Yeah.
he's clearly the goofball in his group. And it's, working on these principles, I think will really change how that happens in your family for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Jimmy Hellwood, fastest way to get out of the headspace of self-hatred when your mind starts heading south.
Man, first step, the hatred word really stood out to me. Like, it's not like, you're having a bad day. It was like, man, I hate myself. Gotta stop with that language. Like, you're definitely what you say to yourself over and over. Like, but words are powerful, even when you say them to yourself. So I would say step one is saying, like, I'm a child of God. I'm amazing. I got up today. I did all these things. Like, actually check off all the good things that are happening in your life. And then say, like, oh, there's some stuff that you can focus on for sure. But I would say, like, definitely get out of the mindset of saying hatred in general. Like, that's not a good way to treat anybody. Could you imagine if I was like, I hate Kipp?
Yeah.
Those are strong words, right? Like, you wouldn't say that to somebody else, probably. So you shouldn't say that to yourself. And I would say stack the wins. That's probably the biggest one, is look at the gain. Like, look at all the good things that are happening in your life, even if they're small, right? Like, they're definitely, we live in the United States. We're very blessed, compared to a lot of other people. Like, you have a roof, you have shelter. That's a good win. Like, you're getting started. You have food. You can go to the gym. Like, start stacking those wins, I think, is the best place to start. And then you'll start feeling more confident about yourself. Dude, I'm sure you messed up somewhere. Everybody has. I have specifically, but it's a mistake and it's something that you're going to correct and move forward on. So it's not, yeah, just stop. Don't say hate, I think.
Yeah. I love, yeah. I wrote down my thoughts around this when I heard this question, because I didn't want to, man, I just didn't want to miss something, right? Because Jimmy, this is huge, right? Like this, let me first give you props. Number one is awareness. So you're already on the path. Most people walk around pissed off, angry, blaming how they feel on everyone else, and taking zero accountability for their own even self-talk. So the fact that you've become aware of it, you know that it's happening, that's step number one. I think step number two, have some compassion. And I'm going to maybe come across a little judgmental on you, Jimmy, as a projection of what I do. The more judgmental I am on other people increases the judgment that I put on myself. So a great way to practice empathy for yourself is to practice empathy, period. And so look for those areas to have some self-compassion and empathy for everybody, including yourself. Then I'd say you should dispute those negative thoughts. You should be challenging them. Some of the times when I'm upset and I'm beating myself up, all I have to do is think through it and go, actually, this event occurred. Did it really mean that? Does it really mean I'm a complete moron? No, I'm actually a fairly capable individual. That's not true. And some would even say that you should know where that is coming from. Now, that's a little bit more on the deep work side, but most stories that we have about ourselves, you've formulated that self-hate story probably years and years and years ago. And this is a constant confirmation bias that it's true. And so And I want to be really clear, at least Jimmy, I'm not a registered psychiatrist and all that jazz, which I love because I get to say whatever I want. Whether you think it's true or not is a different story. But I would suggest that negative self-talk that you've probably formulated, you're carrying it forward. And I would suggest it's not going away. That's it. It's not going away. So don't beat yourself up even more because the self-talk isn't going away, right? Like, just realize it's going to come and then let it go. And the margin between that natural reaction and the event and the meaning we make gets smaller and smaller. But every so often, that's not going to go away. And don't beat yourself up that it's not going away, because then you get all sideways around that. And then the other thing, you alluded to it, Duane, practice gratitude. Whether that's journaling in the morning, whether it's serving people that are less fortunate from you, look for those opportunities to find gratitude in your life. I know it sounds silly. Me backpacking generates a massive amount of gratitude for me. I go camping for overnight in the woods. I come home. That house looks cleaner than it's ever looked. That house I'm highly grateful for. That bed I'm grateful for, right? And so look for those areas to generate gratitude. Maybe it's just mental, but maybe it's even physical elements that might really help you. And last thought I had as a resource, because I think it's profound, Jimmy, is the book, The Four Agreements, or The Fifth Agreement. I would read those books. Those books are spot on around this conversation and the level of poison that your word can create for you and for others. And that's what self-talk is. It's your word. And we need to be careful with how we use our word. Good, Duane?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Tyler, you need to agree, because if you don't agree, man, we need to debate this.
Right. I need some more disagreements, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could cover the book, The Five Disagreements, or the Five Dysfunctions of a Team. This is what I was thinking. Anyhow, okay. Yeah. Tyler Griffin, what are some good ways to assist a spouse who is suffering from postpartum depression and has been reluctant to receive professional help and does not recognize the need for it?
That's a deep one for sure. I haven't ever had a spouse that has had a kid, so we don't have children at the moment. So I would say the only thing that I could think of is start helping around the house. Like, start seeing where there are other ways you can serve and be there for them, no matter what they're going through, right? This is definitely for postpartum, but it's also just in other areas. When you see somebody that's really stressed out, or you see they're, struggling with something else or has high anxiety, it's like, hey, how can I help you around the house? Can I take some chores off? That's that presiding thing that Kipp and I were talking about before, is like, if you can really notice that, just acknowledge that you're there to help out. I wouldn't specifically call out the feelings or emotions in case you get them wrong. You're like, I think you're feeling like this. And you're like, that wasn't it. That's wrong. Like, that can be a minefield on its own, but just be there and say like, hey, I'm here to help out. I carved some extra time out today. How can I serve you? And just see what they come up with, whatever that might be. And then jump in. This is one area where I wouldn't communicate all of it, but you would just be there, like, be supportive and see if they do need to talk. I'm here to listen.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm reading between the lines a little bit here, but like, I'm just imagining Tyler going, hey, honey, you have postpartum depression. You need professional help. Yeah. And you don't realize that you're broken, that you need fixed. That's how that's going to be understood. You're broken and you need fixing. No one wants to hear that, even if it's true. And Tyler, I'm not saying you said that, but for those listening, just be careful with the label, because that label comes up with tons of meaning, and it may not be received well. I agree with you, Duane. Focus on the help and focus on, what is this depression? How do you feel? Why do you feel that way? What can I do to help? What things would I be able to do to help you not feel depressed? Like, dive into it and dive into it. Not that something's broken, but dive into it of, hey, honey, you don't seem as happy. Why? What can I do? What are these areas that what are you thinking about all the time? What's stressing you out the most? It's this. Okay, what can I do? Do you just need me to listen? Be here for you? Get away? Do you want me to address some of those concerns? Look to build safety physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever those areas are that are generating a level of uncertainty. I would double down on and focus on serving.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, one of the things in the question too was like they don't recognize it. So just potentially helping them recognize, like you said, like if you're not, you don't seem as happy, you know, how can I help with that, or what is making you feel that way, and kind of leading them to recognizing some of those traits. And it could be just comparison to what it used to be like or something. Yeah.
Totally. Well, and you might be wrong, you know?
That's true.
Like I trust me, I have had this conversation of, things aren't as good in our relationship. And my wife goes, I thought everything's been going great. Oh, good
Good
to
to
know.
know.
Let
Yeah.
me communicate.
Right.
Right. So who knows? Right. Get to brass tacks, seek to understand. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Luke, Ireland, how have you guys overcome major setbacks on a goal where you're close to achieving? And how does your mindset change? Overcoming major setbacks on a goal that you're close. So you're so close and you
So
don't
close.
achieve it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that happens if anybody's taking big swings in life, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh man, I want to do this really incredible, cool thing, and I wasn't able to achieve it. I feel like a lot of times it's because you had a certain emotional expectation set with that goal. I'm gonna feel like this win. If you don't have that and you say, like, I'm just along the journey and I'm excited to see what's at the top of the mountain. And you're like, you know what? We didn't make it. There was a storm. We had to come back. I've been there. You're like, okay, you got to turn around for safety. And you're like, man, but it was cool. The journey, the people I was with, the hiking experience, we were still, we still made, you look at the positive, we still made it 11,000 feet. Like, that's pretty cool. Whatever that might be, I think is really powerful to focus on all the positive things and the journey as opposed to like that gap. Let's say it was only going 12,000 feet. I went 11. That's pretty freaking cool, right? It's not focusing on the 1,000, it's focusing on the 11 to get to that place and who you had to become to get that far. And another thing I always look at is I do like an after action review to say, like, what could I have changed to get there sooner? Oh, we should have left earlier, should have got up, made sure we were on the trail before it got too bright outside. And so we needed more time on the trail because it was a little harder than we thought. Let's hit it next time. Let's plan how to go after that goal and attack it again, because I don't think anybody that set those big goals actually wants to stop. You're like, oh, I'm done. Big goal's done. I didn't make it that one time. No, you go after it again. How many times have we seen entrepreneurs or whatever that looks like, inventors say like, oh, it was the 10,000 times I failed before I got the light bulb. You just keep going after it over and over, but really focusing on the journey, I think is really powerful.
Totally. And Luke, we get it, man. I mean, I ran my own consulting firm for what, 15 years? Yeah, how many times I had setbacks or marriage and kids and setbacks on how you think your teenager and your kid's going to show up in the world, and they're a pain in the butt. And this shows up everywhere. And I love what you said, Duane. And I feel that's an important thing to even remember for people that do goal setting, because sometimes they delay their happiness, or they align their happiness to the goal being met. Goals are great. They're good things to ensure that we're improving. But guys, don't wait for someday. Don't wait for someday, because life happens, and someday sometimes never shows up. And so it's more about who you are being and how you show up than it is really about the outcome itself. And I know that sounds cheesy, but I believe it. I thought of this quote, Duane, when I read this question. It's by Jenkins Lloyd Jones. Maybe it kind of sums up what you said, Duane, perfectly, I think. Anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time running around shouting that he has been robbed. The fact is that most putts don't drop. Most beef is tough. Most children grow up just to be like people, and most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual tolerance, and most jobs are more full of dull than otherwise. Life is like an old time rail journey. Delays, sidetracks, smoke, dust, cinders, and jolts, interspersed only occasionally by beautiful vistas and thrilling bursts of speed. The trick is to thank the Lord for letting you have the ride.
Perfectly said.
Yeah. We probably should have just read that quote and called
That's
it.
right. That's easy.
That was good.
It's so true. I mean, it's about the journey and how you get there. And then once you have that setback, it's also how you react to it. Right? Could you imagine throwing a tantrum and be like, oh my God, this is how many times, like with your company, right? Like people wouldn't treat you with respect after that. Like stuff happens and you can react to it. I've won clients because we had issues, and it's how I've reacted to that specific thing. And we're like, we had clear communication. There were next steps. We knew what we were going to do, and we explained the situation. Like sometimes that happens. Like, yep, that's unfortunate.
Well, it's where the growth is. Those setbacks are just challenges, opportunities of growth, right? No different than Luke, you busting your tail off in the gym and lifting weights. Those are obstacles. The weight's the obstacle and the way. And your setbacks are just another obstacle, another challenge, another opportunity for growth. Right.
Yeah.
I love it, man. All right. Andy Mooser, beyond setting the example yourself, what's a good way to support your wife who seems to be struggling with self-improvement herself, even when she said she wants and needs to improve? For some context, she's specifically has anxiety and ADHD. So he's already said, hey, guys, don't give me the modeling answer. I know that already, right? So Andy's like, give me something else.
That's a good, it's a good one, Andy. It's like you have the same wife I do. Like very similar situation. And yes, we started with the modeling, but I do a lot of the work too. I invite her along the path. So it's not just modeling it, but it's like, hey, we're going for a walk. You're coming with. Oh, I don't want to, but you're going to, right? Yeah, I'll come. And then it's like, again, like we were talking before, just asking questions, being involved, being engaged, and we're doing something together. So the togetherness of it. I know my wife doesn't love eating like as healthy. Totally fine. Like everybody would love a pizza, right? But I'll cook and then I'll say like, hey, can you come and help me, cook the bacon in the morning? And she's like, oh, sure. So we're doing something together. So we get that quality time as well. And then it's not terrible in her mind. Like we're both doing it. So it's not really just doing it by yourself and you're sitting over there being like, I wish she would eat clean. You're like, oh no, this is why, kind of explaining it and being like, this is what I want for our family, and setting that vision. I want you to be healthy because I want you to live a long time. That's why it's because I care more than anything else. And that's the conversation that I have at my house. And it helps, but it's constant, right? Like it's anything in leadership is you kind of have to keep reiterating that. And then when you see the improvement, really compliment the hell out of it. Be like, wow, you look good in those jeans. Yeah. Must have been all that clean eating. Oh, it's the walks, right? Like, isn't that cool? Or buying her something that's like fun and exciting that gets you going. Like you guys could both go for a walk because you got new trail shoes together. So there's a lot of things you can do together. I think it helps you solidify that bond as a family.
Yeah. Well, and it looks different for all of us, right? Like, we double down. We have our own little tribe culture, right? In Order of Man and Iron Council. We know what self-improvement looks like, but for her, it's probably pickleball with some friends, right? It's reading different books than what you read. Growth looks drastically different for everybody. And so I would try to maybe eliminate some of the judgment. Don't be too harsh, but also realize the human condition. And the human condition is I'm not going to react well to Duane correcting me. It is just what it is. Now, if he thinks I'm the coolest thing ever and we have a great relationship and he just understands me, and then I seek out Duane's advice, Now he's in a position of influence with me. But if all those other things aren't happening and we're just trying to correct, it's not going to be perceived well. So be okay where she's at. She's awesome. She's doing amazing.
Well, like you said, supporting them along their journey too.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
their
want to go play
journey, not
pickleball
your
with
journey.
your friends? That's great. Go for it. Like I'll watch the kids. I'll hold down the fort, whatever that looks like. But yeah, asking what really gets them excited. And I found that when you ask them questions about what's going on in their life, how can I make that come alive for you, whatever that looks like? And they're more apt to want to do that as opposed to, nagging them to death about whatever it might be.
Totally. And I think something I said earlier, I think is applicable here. Share what you're getting. So when you read something that was profound and you really love it, share it in a way that you're moving and inspiring others about what you're doing and the benefits you're getting. Don't share it to manipulate and share because you're excited and they'll consider it for themselves. And one thing you said, Duane, like I think is really valuable. And you just, as an example, Andy, you might find out that she wants to start running, or a goal of hers is always to run a marathon. You might need to run it with her, right? My wife, she had that idea. She's like, I want to run. And I'm like, I'm done. I've done my marathons. I don't want to do anymore. I have no desire to, but I want to be highly supportive. So I started running at nights with her. It was great. Our relationship was better. We talked the whole time. Like it was good for both of us. And I was being highly supportive in doing something I had no desire to do. But that's what support looks like sometimes. Well, so you might need to meet her where she's at. Yeah.
Yeah. Like vice versa. You could do the opposite and say like, hey, will you come support me? So I was running a marathon last year. This reminded me of that. And I got my wife one of those beach cruisers. So in Arizona, we have a lot of canals. So I'll run the canal and it's very smooth. It's paved or it's like gravel. So it's easy. Yeah. I was like, hey, will you come and like time me? Like just kind of like ride next to me. At the beginning, it was a little hard because she was like, you ride too slow for this, or you run too slow for this to be exercise. And I was like, ouch. I was like, that's pretty slow. But over the time, it got faster. And she's like, wow, you're keeping good pace. And it's like good for both of us. But she was out there supporting me because that's what she wanted to do. And no, riding on the beach cruiser wasn't a ton of exercise for her, but it got us both doing the same thing. And she felt really supportive. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dude, when I ran my first marathon, I trained when I was living in Arizona. And so I ran the canal roads all the time, right? There's like, back in the day, there used to be even an app that you could use to calculate distances and stuff with all the canals.
It's great
in Arizona. Yeah. So that's funny. All right, Brandon Clement, going deeper from your recap, Kipp, on the previous all call. So he's talking about, we have an all call, an all hands call every Friday. We have actually 2 of them in the Iron Council, and he's talking about that call last week. What do you and the senior leadership see that battle teams can improve on? And what is the chief criticism from new members of the Iron Council? So I'll let you answer this first, Duane, and then I'll chime in.
Well, I think from like a senior leadership standpoint and battle team leaders, we can always do a better job of communicating the mission and the vision with everybody. I feel like one thing that we do, and it's very easy for a lot of leaders to do, is like, well, I said it once, so everybody should know. Like you really do need to repeat yourself, because there's a lot of times we get 75, 100 new men in the Iron Council on a regular basis. They haven't heard the mission. They haven't been here for 5+ years. They're not as familiar with everything. So I think it's really critical to make sure that we have good onboarding policies, and we're making sure that we're really indoctrinating people and making sure that they feel the mission and the vision of each individual team and the broader Iron Council. Sometimes we'll get squirreled away and be like, this team's the best team and that team's the best team or whatever. There's a lot of team values, but you can bubble that up and really see how connecting in the Iron Council. There's 1,000 men in the Iron Council all over the globe, like we mentioned before. Tons of experience in different insights, and just making sure that everybody knows that and can access it and actually takes advantage of it. So many people join and they don't take advantage of half of the information that we have, or connecting with some of the men that could really change their lives. So I think that's helpful, is just making sure that we're comfortable telling the message, but not letting it get stale at the same time.
What advice, Duane, would you give a team member if they came to you and said, "Hey, what can I do to better the team?"
I would say the number one thing a team member can do is just care. And you care by reaching out and kind of knowing the other men on the team, knowing what their battle plans look like, knowing what their visions are, knowing their family's name, and giving them a call.
Yeah.
Just calling them out once in a while and be like, hey, man, I had somebody that do that to me today. One of the guys on my team, he was like, hey, I saw you didn't log as many miles last week. How's it going in the heat of Arizona? And I was like, oh, yeah, good call. Thanks. I appreciate that. But that was something that an individual team member, you can always reach out, provide that feedback to other men on the team.
Yeah, I love it. I feel there's a natural order to life. And I think it's transcendent to the Iron Council. I think it's transcendent to our jobs, any type of group that we belong to. And at first, we are part of teams for individual success. And the natural order or the progression towards a life of fulfillment, purpose, and meaning will always be found in the development and growth of others. And so guys on the IC, they join usually for themselves. I'm going to join the Iron Council. And then they stay to serve. So care, like you said, Duane, serve the other men on your team. I had this fun story. I was at my kids, by the way, my kids integrate into my work intentionally, by the way. They come into the office all the time, raid the kitchen, eat a bunch of junk food. They didn't know that there's Takis in the kitchen, so they might even show up at the office more often, but they show up here and I love it and I encourage it. And on Friday, I go into the kitchen and there's sticky notes on the fridges, like just, the square sticky notes. And my daughter's left a note on one of the fridges before, like a little inspirational note. And then I saw two and I thought, oh, she's changed it. And I didn't realize it. And I went in there. And so here's some advice from Kika for Brandon. She says, work together. You are not just friends. You are a tribe. So work it out and respect each other. Kika, Kipp's daughter. So there you go. Respect each other. Work it out. You're a tribe. So look out for others, right?
I like that she had to say that she was your daughter, though. And
yeah.
Everybody's like, we know it's Kika.
Yeah, like, right, yeah, it's a given. Yeah. All right. Drew has a question. He says, Duane, what was it like jumping ship from your corporate job to your agency? Any tips for guys trying to do the same? So give us a backstory first, Duane, a little bit.
Yeah, will do. I've worked in corporate America for the last 10 years. So I was a web developer and then I moved up the ranks and became a manager. So when you can't, then you manage. No, it's kidding. So it was just the next progression, right? Like that's something that I really had a good skill with, is making sure that we could speak business and technical really well. So I was able to bridge the gap. I thought that was a really powerful skill, specifically in the corporate world, and then kept getting promoted. And I felt that I hit a glass ceiling, or like a ceiling, with my job and, the opportunities that were there in a larger organization. And it was about a year ago that I
with challenge and opportunity, or from compensation, like what was the ceiling that you felt like you couldn't get through?
All of the above, really. So at a certain point, if you're at a company, there's only one boss, right? It gets fewer and fewer as you get to the top of any food chain, if you would. And the compensation was great. It was good. But it wasn't fulfilling at a certain point because it wasn't challenging anymore. So I was really struggling to find my purpose and direction with that. You just keep doing the same thing. And I guess I'll wait till my boss moves or leaves or quits, and we'll just keep going. Everybody, all the leadership was saying, oh, you're doing a great job. Like, oh, thanks. That's great. What does that get? Yeah. Same bonuses and everything as people that aren't, or whatever. It's just kind of a very normal tiered situation for all the management to get bonuses. Everybody just gets the same bonus no matter what. So I took those skills and I translated that into my own agency. So I run a marketing agency now. I work with my wife. So we both actually left our jobs very similarly at the same time and kind of
Awesome.
went out on a limb. And yeah, it's been a wild ride over the last 12 months. It's very fulfilling. I made way less money this year than I did at my corporate job. Two people,
Yep.
bringing in good salaries to figuring out where the next paycheck's going to come from. But honestly, I'm way more fulfilled now, just happy, excited. We're helping other companies grow and scale, and we're seeing the tangible benefits of us being on board. Whereas before in a corporate organization, it's just like, yeah, we replaced you overnight. You're like, oh, dang. Like, what impact was I really making? The team loved me. They thought I was doing a good job. Everything was great there, but it was just I was really lacking that fulfillment of like my stamp or brand on something and being able
Yeah.
to contribute to my fullest. So, yeah,
Fully expressed, all the cards, agency and freedom in what you do.
exactly.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love it,
it's been
man.
great. But I would say make sure that you have a skill that you can monetize if you're going to do this on your own. I know quite a few men that are looking to start the entrepreneurial journey. Kipp, you mentioned you've
Yeah.
had a consulting firm before. It's not all it's cracked up to be, guys. Like having a paycheck and some insurance is great. Like don't let
Yeah.
the internet guru like
Oh, dude.
romanticize that too much,
Yeah.
It can be a challenge.
It's funny that you say that all the time, man. I mean, hop on social media. Everyone will tell you the same thing. Oh, you should all work for yourselves. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think everyone really wants to, or they're not present to the cost. And the cost is pretty substantial, right? You're not going to work less, probably. You're probably going to work longer hours than you worked when working for someone. You'll have ups and downs. Asia and I, we used to joke around all the time. We're the richest and the poorest people ever because like 1 month or 1 quarter, we're like killing it, right? Life is good. And the next quarter, crap, maybe we can't make the mortgage, right? It was so
Yeah.
stressful. Um, it was so rewarding. It was so stressful. But like everything else, it's not so simple. Everything has a price. Everything has a price. Get clear on, are you willing to pay the price? Because that's not what people tell you on social media that are trying to coach you and or give you like entrepreneurial, coaching. They're not going to tell you the price. Be clear that you want to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that there's an element of like trying to find your sovereignty with that is like now I eat what I kill, literally. Whereas
Yeah.
before it's like I just showed up and dinner was there all the time. Like it was like you said, the refrigerator stocked, you get to go in, it's 9 to 5, we got the normal holidays off. And now it's like, what's a weekend? And you're like, oh, it's 2 more days until Monday. That's 2 more work days. It's like that's totally fine right now. We're going through a season where we know we're putting in the
Yeah.
work and labor to set ourselves up for what we want to build. We have this big vision for our lives, and I know that I can accomplish it here. Whereas, when you have certain rules and expectations set upon you, is like, oh, now if I want to go to Mexico, we're going to go to Mexico.
Yeah.
So it's nice. I don't have somebody to, ask for time off or whatever, because I know that the work I've put in, or I'll get the work done while we're there on the plane, whatever that looks like. So we're in more control of our day-to-day lives. And it's been really freeing. So I appreciate it, but there are definitely trade-offs for sure.
Yeah. So let's give Drew kind of some few tips. So some more tips, if you don't mind. What did you have to have in place? Like, did you just go cold turkey? You ensured that you had X amount of months of savings available. Did you moonlight first for a period of time before you made that leap? Like, what advice would you have in regards to like kind of what your story looked like?
I would advise to have as much savings as possible during those, while you take the leap. Mine was more cold turkey. definitely like left abruptly and was like, all right, I've had it. I'm out. My wife had put her 2 weeks in, and then I had it, and we're like, all right, well, we're doing this together. So we just prayed about it. And that's honestly been the biggest benefit, is having something together. Our faith has really driven us forward with this, is to make sure, like some days all you can do is pray. And for us, God has provided just enough, one more client just to pay the mortgage, keep the lights on, just this one more month. And you're like, okay, cool, we're good. We're in business for September. Let's do this. And then you just keep focusing. So I really laughed when it was like, hey, what are those failures? We were talking about that other question. I was like, oh man, it's on a daily basis. You just have to put a smile on and move forward. So having more savings would be helpful. So we definitely had some savings that we dipped into for the first like 3 months just to get things rolling and figured out. And then really another thing is making sure that you built a solid reputation. My wife had been in the marketing business for a really long time. I've been in technology, so I was a technology leader, and we just called on our friends in our network, and people are like, "Oh, you're in business for yourself? I would love to work with you guys." So we really tapped into that because we had a pretty strong reputation already in the similar space that we were doing. It wasn't kind of out of left field. We weren't starting something vastly different. So that was very helpful. And then over deliver, like over service your clients. That's how we build referrals. And then now we can use them for new clients. They'll be like, hey, do you want to work with so-and-so? Yeah, just give them a call. Our latest one was like, why do they charge so little and do it so quickly when everybody else says it's double the cost and takes twice as long? Yeah. We're starting our book of business, baby. We're not being too greedy, and we're not trying to say we're bigger than what we are at the moment. So be humble and do it and do a good job to start. And then you'll have a huge raving fan base. And then you can start to charge more and more as you get more clients.
Totally. I used to call this the wow factor.
Yeah.
We would have a scope, review the scope. If you meet the scope of the client, that's not good enough. That's meeting expectation. Tell me what marriage is great. Yeah, she meets my expectations. No, you go for wow factor. And so we would have a project kickoff, meet with the client. We'd hang up the phone and they would say, all right, based upon what we know, how do we wow them? They're worried about budget. Great. We're going to come under budget. They're worried about timeline. Okay, we're going to get it done even faster. Oh, they really wanted this other widget that we're going to charge them for. You know what? Let's include it for free. We wouldn't tell them any of those things because we didn't want them to be part of the expectation and the agreement, but we'd go above and beyond to ensure that they were implemented. And I can't stress that enough, Duane. Like, it's spot on, man. You got to wow clients, because when you're small, you don't have the margin to generate a top of funnel marketing team and all this other stuff, right? And so it's all about quality of delivery. The other thing, Drew, that I'd consider is be careful on being rigid with the way you think it's going to look like, and be flexible with that. We talk about that quite a bit on the podcast, is, minimal viable product, right? It's not part of the car. Like, if we took building a car as a minimal viable product, minimal viable is not half of a car that doesn't work. It's a skateboard. And then it's a bike. Then it's a Geo Metro, right? And then it's a BMW. Like, address the need, but you might need to address the need a little bit different than you would like. I coached one individual that wanted to open up a martial arts school, and he was so set on, this has to be brick and mortar. I got to get this business loan. I got to build a building. And then they'll do what people do with the internet. I'm going to build this website, and then like magically people are just going to start coming to it and I get leads. And he thought the same thing with the building. I'm going to build a building and like people will show up. I'm like, no. You get the leads first. You get the top of funnel first. Well, how do I do that without a building? You start teaching your martial art at a rec center in the area where you want a future building. You create a movement. You start podcasting, see if your message resonates, that you get a following, that you're providing value. Then you start doing these other things. So it may not look like you want. I started a consulting firm literally, and I don't know if I had the balls, Duane, to do what you did. I got laid off actually working for Intel and Micron, and it came with a great severance package. So I had like 12 months of severance. So I had a year
That'd be nice
to play around, full salary. And I thought, well, I'll start my own thing, worst case. And this was my hope. If it all goes south, I'll just go find a job. And it just never went south for 15 years. Right? I'm like, never had to go
That's
get a
good
job
run. Yeah.
So it was a great run. And by the way, I didn't stop the business because it was not going well. In fact, it was still projecting really well. In fact, I sold my book to the firm I work for today. But regardless, my point being is I got in that market not by doing all these things and making a consulting firm. An example in my scenario is, what did I do? I went to another firm and said, hey, corp to corp contract with me, with my company name, with my S corp, not me as a W-2 or 1099. And I started contracting to other consulting firms with my company. Does that make sense? So I got the tax benefit of an S corp. It was corp to corp agreements, not 1099, right? And I started creating momentum through using headhunters and contractors to land my own contracts. It was brilliant. And literally, I got my notice before my 2 weeks were up leaving the company. I already had a contract aligned with the Department of Defense for a 6-month contract. Dude, it was easy. And I didn't do anything. Someone else did all the legwork to find that work for me. So my point being, I'm not flexing here. My point being is it may not look like the way you think it's going to look. So be flexible with what that step looks like.
Yeah, I could go on and on for days on this one, but you're right. It doesn't necessarily look like what you think it's going to look like, and it's testing the market just to see, like, is somebody going to want this? Like, oh, this group of people might not be the right fit. Maybe it's this group, or you start to change some of those services and kind of tweak what you're offering at different times. So it just depends on what industry you're in, but always make sure that the demand's there for it. I've seen so many times you're like, I've got this brilliant idea, and you're like, yeah, nobody wants that though. So that's
no one's willing to pay you money for your great idea.
Exactly. Yeah. And not being willing to take the smaller stuff, like start out small. We've gotten a lot of referral business from other larger agencies that are like, this is too small for us. And you're like, I'll take that all day. And then we'll grow it into a bigger opportunity for us. One of our best clients, we got that way. So it's been great.
I love that, man. Cool. Well, hey, Duane, it's been good, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And as a wrap up, guys, I mean, really our call to action here that I want to remind you guys, obviously Ryan's in Africa. They're going to be doing more of these things. He's a part owner with M42 Adventures. Check out M42adventures.com to learn more about, I'm sure they'll post pictures, and actually even on his gram, he already has been flexing about all these awesome hunts that he's been on with his son, Brecken. And then the other call out item is on October 1st, Ryan's going to be doing an online course called Divorce Not Death. And this is really focused on lessons learned around dealing with that concept divorce. If you're in that space, man, whether it's joining the Iron Council or whether it's getting help or counseling or whatever, that could be a really dark time in your life. And so look for resources to help you deal with that. And of course, you can connect with Ryan on Twitter and Instagram at Ryan Mickler. And you can connect with Duane Winkel at Duane Winkel, WINKELJR on Instagram. Thanks, Duane, for joining us. And men, until next time, take action and become the men you were meant to be.